Okay, everybody, here's a quick review about what's going to be on the quiz next Wednesday. Remember, it's going to be the first 2 weeks. Look at the PowerPoints, look at the text, and look at the study guide. And you should be okay. So let's talk about be able to know direct democracy in California and the criteria needed to place measures on the ballot. Specifically, know how how many numbers of signatures you need to get for a petition, how many for a statute, how many for a constitutional amendment. Remember, 8% for a constitutional amendment, 5% for a statute. Okay, so remember that. Also remember that, generally there's a threshold of 66% to pass a new tax, or to lower a tax, or even to raise a tax. So you need a 66% criteria to do that. And kind of with the concept of direct democracy, it's more of a pluralistic type view where you put the legislation in the hands of the citizens, and they'll be able to um, enact change. And we saw a good case with Prop 13, where Prop 13 lowered the property tax to 1% of your assessed value of your home. Okay, so know what elite theory is. Remember, elite theories are the few with power, their values, what they do, age, uh, marital status, religion, and so on. Know what the characters of the masses are. The masses can usually be considered to be passive, apathetic, and ill-informed. And, when we also look at defining democracy, make sure you understand that democracy is kind of belief that all people in I mean, government by the people. You know what I mean? Kind of that thing. That's how we would define democracy, as government by the people. And in turn, how do we define pluralism? Pluralism is the belief that we have groups that will come in and bargain about laws and rules that may happen in a country. Let's see. Know the proprietary um, colony, know the royal colony, and know the charter colonies and the difference. Um, know who was able to vote during colonial times and at the infancy of our country. Remember, white men with property were the only ones that were allowed to vote. Um, don't worry about free soil and absolution. We're not really going to get into that. Sir Edmund Burke did coin the phrase salutary neglect, which was a kind of a reference that the prior to the taxation that was put in place, the English crown really didn't put too much enforcement, and a lot of laws were laxly enforced during that time. Um, know what a social contract is. Remember, John Locke said that we're entitled to life, liberty, and property. And that contract is where we give up some rights, and in turn, the government will protect our life, liberty, and property. Know the laws that some of the acts that were imposed on the colonies that upset them, like the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, and so on. Just kind of know the generalities. You don't have to know the each specifics of it. Just know what each act did. Um, and what were Locke's beliefs on social contract? Remember, we kind of have to have kind of a belief where government is, kind of enforced by, or run by a form of what's called popular consent. So we, as the populace here, consent to being ruled, and in turn we will have protection from the government against our neighbors, as well as against other countries. Know what the Virginia Plan, the New Jersey Plan, and the Connecticut Compromise was. Uh, Remember that the New Jersey Plan called for a one house um, legislature and one vote per state. The Virginia Plan was very kind of similar to what English Parliament is, where you have a Congress, a part of Congress that is determined by population, and then 2 senators per state. So, um, with that being said, and these senators would have been chosen by the House of Representatives, so kind of a parliamentary model. The compromise was Connecticut. The state of Connecticut came up where we have a two-house legislature, one chamber, which is House of Representatives, that's voted on by the people. Before the 17th Amendment, senators were elected by state legislatures, and we have 2 senators per state. And a separate executive and judicial branch. Know what tyranny of the majority is, and how Madison feared that, any type of legislation that is passed by a legislative body, may be the subject of tyranny of the majority, and you have to have a way to protect against that. And here in the United States, we protect against tyranny of the majority by having the courts act as an independent arbitrator and making sure that the minority does not have their rights affected, right, adversely. So the checks and balance system, in a sense, is designed to make majority rule, but as long as it doesn't interfere on the rights of the minority. Know what the ironic part of the Declaration of Independence was? All men are created equal, even though slaves and women weren't a part of that. Know that how the Constitution addressed slavery, the Three-Fifths Compromise, Congress not ending the slave trade until after 1808, and the guaranteed return of escaped slaves. Know some of the more important amendments to you, the First Amendment or the Fifth Amendment. Just know generality is what they do. Know why the Articles of Confederation were considered to be weak. You had no executive or judicial branches. State governors were relatively weak, and the federal government didn't have the power to tax or regulate trade because the states were involved. And it was hurting the government from developing the national economy. Know a consequence of the system of checks and balances, and that sometimes it's easier just to keep things the way they are as opposed to enacting a new type of legislation. And this is designed, also to make sure that, the tyranny of the majority doesn't happen. Just some basic checks that the executive branch has. The executive branch can veto any type of law that Congress passes. But on the other end, the legislative branch can determine that they want to override the veto of the president, and they're within their ability to do that. Know what Marbury versus Madison is, and how that gave the court the power to determine whether or not a law is unconstitutional, and that's a lot where the Supreme Court will derive their power from, where they determine whether or not a law is constitutional. And kind of, the Constitution in turn also limits the powers of the government, because the founders obviously believed that government was a threat to individual freedom. See. Know what the executive branch can do as far as checks. They can also issue executive orders. It's possible that Congress can amend the Constitution. Remember, Congress and the states have responsibility for that. Though the president also has the power to appoint. Remember, they can nominate members of their cabinet, as well as members of the Supreme Court. And these are all need to be confirmed by a majority vote in the Senate. And as part of the Constitution, remember we talked about the Bill of Rights and how the Bill of Rights protects the citizens from government, right? The citizens of our nation from government. Know what the 10th Amendment as well is? You know, we talked about the 10th Amendment that conceivably the federal government could come in and shut down marijuana dispensaries. Because remember, this is kind of goes in conjunction with what we talked about with the Supremacy Clause, where federal law will outweigh state law. And remember, in all these checks and balance systems that we just talked about, remember that we got to understand that each branch is completely independent of the other. No way the consensus among elite is, probably the best way would be to protect, we all believe that individual liberty should be protected. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. And then we can go in and answer them. We can set up a Zoom appointment or whatever's easiest for you, all right? So just go ahead and listen to this video a couple of times and look at the study guide while I'm doing it. Remember, you can have a 3x5 note card. You can write front and back. It doesn't really matter to me. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.